never lose your common sense. To me, common sense is the ultimate litmus test of any validity of your models. If your model looks commonsensically appealing, then it's a valid model. Otherwise, it's not. And therefore, as a result, now what actually differentiates between placement and employability? See, maybe that you can show some statistics for some of the ranking agencies like NIRF, NAC, or maybe that when I was Vice Chancellor of UP Technical University, we had created that UP Technical University Academic Excellence Award model where you talk about placement. Now, placement statistics may perhaps not be a validation of the employability. Many times people might make arrangements to increase their statistics, but a person loses the job 3 months later, because one must understand very clearly that business is getting globally competitive. And unless people who are hired by the business or industry are able to contribute much more than what they get paid for, they may not be able to retain the job. And therefore, employability not only deals with getting a job, but even retaining that job. And therefore, the capacity, capability, and a combination of attributes that make you employable are those that you can get a job and stay hired there, continue to retain. Retaining the job is only possible if you are employable, even if you got an employment. And alternatively, if you are really employable and for the moment you have not got a job, I'm sure that you will get one, because what is critical is employability and not maybe just a few months of patience, because there may be a right kind of vacancy available in that kind of skill sets, etc., etc. Many times the employment status is function of the state of the economy and whether a particular sector is now under stress of development. But then if you are employable, not only you'll get a job, you'll be able to retain it. But if you are not employable, and even if you manage to get the job by whatever means, you may not be able to retain it. And therefore, employability is different from employment. It's the capacity to get the job, retain the job, and flourish in that job by contributing your utmost and delight your employer. And therefore, as a result, this notion, and therefore here, in fact, I have not been very much impressed by the NASSCOM and other agencies talking about only 25% of Indian engineers are employable or Indian managers are employable. To me, perhaps it's not, and my personal view is not a right statement, because employable for what? The nature of job, the world of business is not homogeneous. A person may be employable in R&D, a person may be employable in marketing, another person may be employable in manufacturing on shop floor in terms of design development, another person may be employable for even PR work or in terms of the managing or organizing capabilities in managing the administrative work. So therefore, unless we know the context in which you are hiring a person, does he or she have the skill sets that are required, making a sweeping statement that only 25% of our engineers are employable, to my mind, although has been picked up in a big way by agencies and have come out with the shortcut methods through finishing schools in telling, okay, I have your people are not employable. I have a solution. Give me 6 months of finishing school job. I'll fix him up. I'll make him employable. To my mind, employability is a sustained learning, development, and nurturing that takes place over the 4 years of your. There are no quick fixes to get your employability in 3 months programs. You may learn some methods and techniques. That means some knowledge component or some skill. To me, employability is a much wider concept, as you would see from the model that we developed. And secondly, it's now found that many people leave at least 5 to 7 times their career changes takes place in industry with the nature of the work. So therefore, what we, in order to, some of the do's that you need to do to remain employable, present positive qualities that you have in you, communicate effectively with all employers, co-workers, consumers, customers, clients, patients, users, meet your responsibilities at work, knowledge in a specific career. Therefore, you'll know. Now, for example, you should have knowledge of that particular, that's where I see employable as a mechanical engineer, employable as an electrical engineer. The differentiator is you must have the domain knowledge. And unless you know the domain knowledge component, you cannot make a sweeping statement about managers and engineers not being employable. And to my mind, so much scare has perhaps been spread by that 25% employability of graduates that engineering is losing its shine. I remember when I was studying in IIT Kharagpur, the very fact that I was studying in an IIT Kharagpur engineering, there was enormous respect in the society that you are studying engineering. But today, the shine of engineering profession, for a variety of reasons, has gone down. So much so that in a cynical way, people might say that if अगर और कहीं दाखिला नहीं मिला तो इंजीनियरिंग में दिलवा देंगे. आपको आपका सेंट डिस्पेंस में नहीं मिला तो वहां दिलवा देंगे. डीयू में नहीं मिला. Therefore, to me, engineering will never lose. It's a temporary lull in the profession. I'm very, very, very positive because engineering is an has muted me. Okay. It seems my host has muted me. Have you? Hello, it says your host has muted me. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. Now, therefore, that means I have lost my presentation. Okay. Okay. All right. Now, therefore, let me now, the life skills. One of the important component of employability is decision making. It shows decision making theory of choice. A person, irrespective of the nature of job that he is doing, should be able to choose the better of the options available. And therefore, decision making with the theory of choice, learning decision making skills as an important component of employability, irrespective of the kind of study that you are doing. Whatever be your branch of study, your capacity to generate alternative options, your capacity to identify your objectives and prioritize them, and choosing the best of the options available is an important component of employability. Problem solving, goal setting, all these are part of the critical thinking, communicating effectively, positive attitude, being cooperative, accepting and using feedback, flexibility, leadership, conflict resolution. Now, in fact, these are some of the generalities that I wanted to talk about. Now I go to specifics. Let's look at a clearly understood definition of employability as given by the Higher Education Academy of UK. A set of skills, knowledge and attributes. Now you can see it's important. And my model that I'll be sharing with you is hovering around these three attributes. A set of skills, knowledge and attitudes that make an individual more likely to secure and be successful in the chosen occupations to the benefit of themselves, the workforce, the community, and the economy. That means a win-win. And therefore, that employability is far greater and a more comprehensive concept than percentage placement statistics. Now, this is where I perhaps I'm sharing those some of the concerns that now, and of course, these are the data that we have obtained. Now, there is a range of employability status of MBA graduates, which indeed the range of employability to 0 to 20%, 32% of the people, 21 to 40%, 24%, 41 to 60%, 22%, and so on. Mean employability status is 48.4%. This is one of the studies. Now, as I was mentioned, this way, SOCM Education Committee in 2006, only 7% of MBA graduates are employable. Rest earn 8 to 10,000. Now, this is a 8 to 10,000 salary is an underemployment and perhaps an exploitation of people. And therefore, you can't judge the employability on what somebody is getting. Maybe that the market scenario today is not able to compensate talent. And therefore, 7% of MBA graduates only employable really makes the people rush towards those elite institutions where who are able to project 100% employability and placement. Aspiring minds, merit track. These are NESCOM survey which was talked about. Now, to me, we now discuss the various models. In fact, in the research that we have done on employability, where I'll share my model, you see it towards the end. In 2013, I developed a model of employability, and for which we have further worked out. Now, some of the existing methods of employability, like merit track, cognitive ability, verbal, quantitative reasoning, aspiring minds, MCAT, English, quantitative ability, logical ability, domain knowledge, DOTS model. Now, here you only talk about specific skill sets, but where do you combine all of them into a measurable index? So these are some of the existing models of employability. But the model that I wish to share with you is the one that I have developed, and we've used it. Now, this model of employability integrates all the three attributes of what makes a person employable in an integrated measurable framework. Because as I mentioned, if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. And these are, I mean, if you wish, you can call it AKS model or ASK model. A is attitude, rated between 0 to 1. K is knowledge, between 0 to 1. And skills are 0 to 1. Where alpha is a relative weight that you give to knowledge over skill. For example, if you give alpha as 0.6, it would mean that for that kind of a profession that you're choosing, or that kind of employment that you're looking for, or you're developing yourself, about 60% weightage ought to be given to the domain knowledge that you have, and 40% weightage could be given to the skill. Now, the difference between knowledge and skill has been that knowledge is what you have been learning in classrooms, in laboratories, through project work, through research papers, through seminars. But skill is the capacity to apply that knowledge to solve the problems of the society or the employer. And therefore, unless you apply that knowledge to solve a problem, and you do not have that requisite skill set, now this is where perhaps one of the gaps in our engineering education has been, that while we have been focusing only on knowledge, and even in knowledge, maybe on information, capturing information. As you know, there is a hierarchy: data leading to information, information leading to knowledge, knowledge leading to wisdom. Therefore, in our current curriculum that we evolve focuses more on information and knowledge, data-driven decision making, data-driven data science, data analytics, business analytics. Done, useful. It's an important. I'm not undermining it, but this is only one part of the story. The total employability of an engineering or management graduates, or any graduates for that matter, or postgraduate who has been a doctoral student, is alpha times K plus 1 minus alpha times S. That means a judicious weighted combination of knowledge and skill. Now, this becomes an important component. In fact, in our national education policy, NEP 2020, this part has been taken care of. There's so much of focus on skill because perhaps it was realized that there was a gap between knowledge and skill in our educational system. There's lack of practical orientation. There's a lack of project orientation. There's a lack of involving people in problem solving of the society in the process of learning and developing them through internships. Therefore, knowledge and skills need to be integrated in a same individual. Now, there is a recent new trend of having separate skill universities or skill colleges or vocational colleges. Perhaps to me, that's not a proper perspective, because even they require knowledge. You simply say, I'm a skill university, or I'm giving a program in my skill. Now, skill also requires knowledge. And that's why this alpha takes care. For example, depending upon the level at which you're hiring, you adjust alpha accordingly. For example, suppose you're hiring an engineering profession at the technician level, at ITI level, maybe alpha can be 0.2. He should have an overall knowledge about the engineering field or the domain knowledge in terms of theoretical understanding of that area, but 80% of the focus should be his skill. So the knowledge and skill have a 20-80 ratio because you're hiring at a technician level. Their skill becomes, but knowledge still needs to be given. A skill without knowledge can perhaps not get the best out of a person. And therefore, segregating knowledge and skill as two different entities which are nothing to me, knowledge and skill are integral part of the same person. He has knowledge and skill to apply that knowledge to solve the problems of the society and hence become employable because it becomes a value addition proposition. But depending upon the level at which you are hiring a person, alpha can be adjusted. For example, for a technician, as I mentioned, but suppose you're hiring a research scholar, a PhD scholar for an assistant professor position. Maybe alpha can be 0.8, 80% knowledge of that area, latest development in that area, and 20% could be the skill to express, because for a teacher, the skill sets are knowledge and the capacity to express that and empathy. And therefore, to me, depending upon the level and the nature of job that you are hiring, and later on when I show case studies, you'll be able to appreciate it more. Therefore, alpha takes care, but don't look at knowledge and skill separately. To me, even skill requires knowledge and knowledge requires skill, but moderated by their appropriate weightage depending upon the context and the level at which you are hiring a person. But what is more important, all this gets multiplied by attitude. Attitude, therefore, becomes a critical success factor in employability in my model. Because if you know, if a person is brilliant and is skilled, but is perceived to be highly negative, a person having a highly negative attitude, even if he is knowledgeable and skilled person, in my mind, he is not employable. Because, and that's why in this model, I made attitude as a multiplier factor, a critical success factor, because knowledge and skills can be acquired, but attitude takes decades of lifetime to build up. There are no shortcuts to building attitude. And that's why, the so-called finishing schools and others who say that within 3 months, I'll make you employable. You can't shape attitude in 3 months' time. Some of the communication skills or some writing skills or maybe some, answering questions can be done. Attitude, therefore, is a critical success factor. So, and therefore, in this model, a person is an absolutely intelligent and brilliant person, even skilled, but perceived to be negative in attitude. Perhaps it will be very difficult to find a job for him. And even if one finds a job, that's placement. Employability is retaining that job because no employer would like to get a brilliant but negative person. And in this model, because attitudinal factors are critical in getting and retaining a job, and because if you have positive attitudes as a part of your employability skills, with a positive attitude, you can find solutions to every problem. There is no problem which does not have a solution, provided you honestly look for finding a solution to that problem. So if you have a positive attitude, you'll find a solution to every problem and you become a problem solver. But if you have a negative attitude, you'll find problems with every solution offered. Any solution is a but, he'll find fault with it. Therefore, if you are not part of the solution, then you are the problem. There's a very famous saying that if you are not part of the solution, then you are the problem. And therefore, in developing attitudinal parameters in generating employability amongst our graduates, engineering and management graduates and any other graduate, therefore, our focus on nurturing these students in developing positive attitude, and somewhere perhaps in our course curricula, we have not given so much of attention to attitudinal building as it ought to be given, because it's a critical success factor, even if you are very highly knowledgeable, but extremely self-centered, extremely dishonest in your dealing. An intelligent person with a negative attitude, in my mind, is more injurious to the society than a mediocre with a positive attitude. Because a mediocre with a positive attitude would be modest, would be trying to learn, and my model takes care of that. And therefore, here a positive attitude becomes a critical success factor, and in a good way, because at least in engineering, we are suppose under the bracket the quantity is very high, but multiply this very high with -1 attitude, then becomes an extremely great liability. The skill set becomes a liability, and therefore in this model, therefore each one of these, as I mentioned now, how do I measure it? You can't measure attitude, knowledge, and skill. How do you measure it? So I now develop a measurement model, and I'll tell you their variants on that too. Now, for example, why attitude becomes important, and for that reason, perhaps you might not be aware. When I was the Vice Chancellor of UP Technical University, which is now called AKTU, from 2006 to 2009, I realized this. That was the beginning of my ideas at the employability dimensions. The knowledge, the attitude becoming a critical success factor. At least realization that in the educational process, in fact, I convinced the stakeholders of the university system to introduce a compulsory audit course on human values and professional ethics, which eventually later on became a credit course. I have no fight with it. But then if you're truly positive attitude, you don't worry about credits. You enjoy learning an enormous life skill in terms of developing a positive attitude. So that compulsory course on professional ethics and human values was intended with that objective, because at least some degree of sensitization, although I was very clear in my mind, by giving a single course, it's not an either or, that by taking that course, you'll become at least some sensitization, because technology without values can be disastrous. If you have very good knowledge on technology, but you have absolutely self-centered attitude, you may use the technology to hoodwink the society. And that's why integration of good positive values go extremely well in developing employability skills amongst people. And with that objective, I'd introduced that compulsory audit course on human values and professional ethics. I don't know whether it's still continuing, but then now let's look at what we do. Now, how do we measure these three things? For example, in this example, you could take alpha as 0.62 just for MBA grade. Now, what I've done here, what is it, please? Who can see this transcript recording? I don't know that I'm getting a participant is enabled closed captioning. Oh no, and anyway, I'm presuming that people are listening, or at least those people who are interested in listening to me are listening. Therefore, what is now it's an important point that you need to address. How do I measure this? Anything that you can't measure, you can't manage. Therefore, in order to measure it, I came across a very positive, modeling strategy. Indeed, I used that model. I don't know whether you're aware. I did when I was Vice Chancellor of UP Technical University. I introduced another very powerful idea, which indeed became very popular in those times, UP Technical University Academic Excellence Model, Award Model, which indeed for 3 years it was very effectively implemented, and later on my successors gave it up. I don't think it exists anymore now. And there I got the idea, which I induced. So what happens? See, when you do perception, now it's easy to, when you interview a person, it's easy for you to gain a perception about him. But converting that perception into number is a difficult job. And therefore, many times our rating agencies, our NAC teams, our NIRF team, the team that comes for MBA, NBA, or any inspection team, they might have a perception, But when it comes to converting that perception into number, perhaps one is not able to make a good conversion. Now, I have developed a model here where you just need to give perception. That's it. And perception is easy to gain. The number automatically comes from the perception. Therefore, there is no difficulty of perception converting to numbers. You don't have to give numbers. The numbers come automatically. So therefore, you are able to measure attitude automatically once you give your perception about the various sub-attributes what constitutes attitude. And this I use a 5-point Likert scale. For example, when you talk to a person, when you interview, when you debate, you discuss, you interact with him or her, it perhaps is relatively easier for you to make a perception about that person on a particular sub-attribute like integrity or discipline from poor to excellent on a 5-point Likert scale. Therefore, you take as poor is 1 and excellent is 5. Therefore, what I've done here, that it developed 20 sub-attributes of each of these attributes. That means 20 sub-attributes of attitude, 20 sub-attributes of the knowledge in a domain area, 20 sub-attributes of skills. And once these 20 sub-attributes are rated through a perception survey ranging from 1 to 5 or from poor to excellent, because perception, at best, the error of judgment, unless you are biased. If you are biased, then no model will help you. If you're honest about your perception, at best, you can make an error of 1 column. For example, a very good may be rated as good or good may be rated as very good. That's about a 20% error of perception that one can have. And it may get, for example, averaged out when you go for all. And therefore, in this, you just need to simply tick that particular attribute you find in a person ranges from poor, satisfactory, good, very good, or excellent. And automatically the score would come. For example, now let me list these attributes. For attitude, as a critical success factor, the 20 sub-attributes of that what constitutes attitude: positive thinking and optimism, integrity, discipline, team spirit, compassion, empathy, and concern for others. Now, this concern for others and empathy, I wish to highlight on this relatively more. Because if you look at one of our major concerns for low employability, or a major concern for a relatively poor, kind of the goodwill among society that we have today, or a poor customer satisfaction, is the lack of concern for others. For that, I have developed a separate value grid, which indeed might, the value grid is a 2-dimensional grid like you have in a managerial grid. Concern for self and concern for others, ranging from high to low. Now, therefore, there are 4 quadrants of this concern for. Now, unfortunately, in a fairly sizable, and you can do this exercise yourself, you can see it happening on roads. The kind of driving habits and chaos that you look at Indian driving behavior on roads. Imagine on a very busy junction, if the traffic lights are not working and policeman is absent, the kind of chaos that it causes and causing disadvantage to everyone is basically utmost concern for self and little concern for others. If you have high concern for self and low concern for others, you cannot deliver customer satisfaction. You cannot be a team player. You cannot have compassion. You cannot have empathy with others. And as a result, you cannot have a positive attitude. And therefore, one of the important attributes of a positive attitude is empathy and concern for others. And perhaps this is where we need to, right from our foundation at primary schooling level, we need to nurture this concept of, that means don't sacrifice yourself. I'm not saying that don't have concern for self, but don't flourish at the cost of others. Don't flourish by hoodwinking the society. And therefore, balance concern for self with the concern for others. And many times it's not done. And therefore, in order to enhance our employability skills amongst people, or improving our attitudinal parameters, we need to learn empathy and concern for others. Now, I must also mention that attitude and values can't really be taught, these are caught. So the way our teachers show empathy towards students, the way our teachers show empathy towards their colleagues, the way the management of the organization shows empathy and concern for students and faculty, all these are intertwined factors, and therefore in developing positive attitude, empathy and concern for others is an important attribute. Trustworthiness, punctuality, this is another parameter where perhaps we don't score very high. Commitment and passion to a good cause, enthusiasm, then leadership qualities, capacity to lead, taking initiative and drive, cleanliness, pleasantness in your personality profile, emotional intelligence is being talked about extensively now. IQ is now giving way to more emotional intelligence. Fortunately, there's more focus on emotional intelligence now than the IQ, intelligent quotient. Perhaps a realization that the attitude matters much more than intelligence. Desire to learn, as I mentioned earlier, learning to learn, being ethical in whatever you do, whatever be your role, have an absolute ethical standards in performing that role. And in the long run, you'd notice, if you look at the businesses that have flourished and perished, one of the common attribute of businesses we have sustained, they may not grow in an exponential rate, but they have sustained over centuries of time. The only way to have a sustained development of an organization is a conduct of ethical behavior in whatever you do. Flexibility and open-mindedness. In fact, people say a human mind is like a parachute. It only works if it's open. With a closed mind, no learning can go. And therefore, open-mindedness and flexibility are an integral part of developing a positive attitude and selflessness. Now, these are the 20 attributes that my model takes care of. It may not be able to take 100%. There's nothing like 100% in life. And therefore, a very simple thing that these 20 attributes might not be able to capture 100% of the attitudinal parameters, but they capture most of it. And as one of my good friends who's no more used to say, it's better to be approximately right than being accurately wrong. And therefore, since you say attitude cannot be measured, and hence, these 20 attributes I've already given the reason that all that you need to do in measuring this is just find out on a 5-point Likert scale from poor to excellent, where this person ticks. You tick it. Okay, he's good. You tick under column 3, or he is poor. Put it column 1. You can make an error of judgment, an honest error of judgment with one column, which about 20% error. Now, once you have that, it's easy for you to now convert this into, now I bring that thing that I talked about. For example, attitude. Now you can see this model. Once you know AIJ is 1, if you tick in the ith row in the jth column and 0 otherwise, and therefore as a result, once you tick 20 attributes ranging from 1 to 5, just add up. For example, if I do that, after you converted this, you have mapped the attributes that constitute the attitude of that person. Just count the number of frequency of these ticks in this page. For example, find out of these 20 attributes, how many of them he scores poor. Just count the number of ticks. Suppose there are 2 ticks in poor, and they can be, nobody is perfect, and even the most employable person might have some negative aspects in one's personality profile. We should be open about it. But find out how many ticks under poor. So suppose if Fi is the number of frequency of ticks under poor multiplied by 1. So suppose there are 3 ticks poor, 3 into 1. Suppose there are 5 ticks in satisfactory, 5 into 2. Suppose there are 10 ticks under good, 10 into 3. Suppose there are 2 ticks under very good, 2 into 4. and suppose there is no tick under excellent 0 into 5. Just convert these frequencies of your perception, add it up, and this will give you a total score out of 100, the percentage attitudinal score. You're able to measure it. And if you want to convert into between 0 to 1, divide by 100, and therefore it will be attitude A. And therefore in this model, either percentage or in fractional terms. So therefore the total score out of 100 on attitude. So where does this person count on attitude? Can be summed up. Now, this actually explains why I have resorted to this, so that there is no dilemma or dichotomy of converting perceptions into numbers. That's where we fail. I mean, we might say a person, I mean, this institution is satisfactory. The overall say, yes, satisfactory, but you give them an A grade. Or you say, oh, it's an excellent, but you give them a B grade. Now, that's where the difficulty lies. And therefore, in this model, the human error of converting perception to numbers is eliminated. You just count and you get the numbers. Same thing now is done for knowledge. Now, knowledge, I said, now it depends upon the subject matter. This is the domain knowledge. And therefore, that's where the employability model would differ in mechanical engineering from computer science and engineering to electrical engineering to MBA. And therefore, this knowledge has to be domain knowledge specific. And this example that I'm in fact giving is for an MBA, because that's where I applied this model in an MBA program. But later on, I'll tell you for engineering, it can be done the same way. And then find out what kind of a knowledge a good MBA graduate must have. And list those 20 attributes of knowledge. And later on, I'll show this model we have been able to use for developing curriculum. For example, what you require in an MBA graduate, these 20 attributes: general awareness and knowledge. A general awareness. I mean, he's expected to know the general state of the economy. He should be having an overall understanding of the competitive advantage, understanding the customer and competitor, capacity to understand the requirements of a customer and competitor, understanding business environment, understanding globalization, systems thinking and system dynamics. Now, problems of the decision making, and when you're solving a problem, the problems are to be seen as in totality. Because when you even solve an engineering problem, there may be a mechanical engineering aspect of that problem. There may be a civil engineering aspect of that problem. There may be electrical engineering aspect of that problem. And this way, unfortunately, by having segmented non-interactive silos of engineering departments, we have to some extent eliminated the system thinking. People think of their own narrow subsystem thinking, only look at my problem from mechanical engineering perspective or civil engineering perspective, electrical engineering perspective, and X doesn't talk to Y. This narrow non-interacting silos that we are building in engineering education amongst departments is counter to the systems thinking, because problems are to be seen in its totality. And that's why primarily, and perhaps the multidisciplinarity that the national education policy now talks about focuses on that. Too much super specialization in your domain knowledge without understanding of the other subject may not get you the tag of being a great problem solver, because problems are to be solved in its totality, and then understanding that there are different viewpoints in addressing that problem. The systems thinking, look at the problem in its totality, the system as a whole, and therefore all problems and decision making, if seen from a systems perspective in its totality, in an integrated systems framework, would perhaps give you a better perspective in solving problems rather than a narrow subsystem thinking. And as a result, a good MBA graduate must have that holistic thinking of, because management and systems are intertwined, and system dynamics. The dynamics is organizations are not static phenomenon. Organizations are dynamic living systems, and therefore how the profile of that company and organization changes over time. And a good understanding of system dynamics as an important understanding of seeing the interactions amongst the various causal variables and looking at the overall system behavior of the organization. A good understanding of system thinking, system dynamics, foundations of general management principles. Whether you are specializing in marketing, finance, or wherever, you require a strong foundation of general management principles. because all those principles would be required. Cross-cultural issues in business. For example, understanding of the cross-cultural, because today the workforce is increasingly becoming multicultural, national. And therefore, as a result, you should be sensitive to know about some knowledge, organized knowledge about cross-cultural issues in business. Statistical analysis and quantitative techniques, because anything that you cannot measure, you cannot manage. And therefore, in order to make informed decisions in your domain knowledge, you should have a good understanding of statistical analysis and quantitative techniques. Decision science and decision making. Managers are required to make decisions right from operational, tactical to strategic, and therefore a good exposure to the methods and techniques of decisions science, particularly more relevant to the current scenario of the business, and multi-objective decision making, because multi-attribute decision making or multi-dimensional, multi-objective decision making, because today no decision can be made with one single objective in mind. And therefore, the relevant kinds of decision science techniques, which are multi-attribute decision making or multi-criteria decision making, and maybe more probabilistic and which captures the uncertainties of the VUCA world, and therefore relevant methods and techniques of decision science and decision making. Concepts of productivity, how do you measure what is productivity, how do you measure it and improve? Because ultimately, when you are hired with the organization, you are hired for enhancing productivity. Productivity is getting more from less. So how do you maximize your production of good quality products with consuming minimum possible resources? That's what will give you a competitive advantage. And therefore, a course, an exposure or a module on productivity concepts, measurement and improvement, quality and value for money, cost reduction. How do you cut down the cost so that a customer gets value for money? The only way you can remain competitive in the society in a globally competitive world is if you offer value for money. Value for money is giving a good quality at a lower cost. And this happens. For example, look at, although there's a rush for getting MBA in IIMs, but there's an institution, there's a department under Delhi University called FMS, Faculty of Management Studies. Now, its craze for getting admissions in Faculty of Management Studies, FMS, is perhaps as high as maybe in some of the top-notch business schools, because they offer the value for money, a good quality education at a lower cost of fee. And therefore, this may apply for any product or service. And therefore, you need to have a good exposure to the students. What is the value for money? And therefore, concepts like value engineering, value analysis, value management, quality and value for money, cost reductions, because without eroding quality, how do you offer value for money? Cut down your cost, knock out in a unnecessary cost. That's what value analysis does. Knock out hidden unnecessary cost of doing business so that you are able to offer the requisite quality at a much lower cost and hence improve your competitive advantage. Then, I now move forward. Then project management. Project management, macro and microeconomics issues, human resources management, financial planning and control, marketing, advertising and consumer behavior, operations management, materials management, supply chain, retail operations and logistics. This is another emphasized topic in business management today, even in standalone business schools. Now, for example, the materials management perhaps is many times taught only as an elective, if at all. And now they're given a relatively fancy name to it as supply chain. To me, supply chain is as materials management in an integrated systems framework. So managing material flow into, through, and out of the system is what supply chain management is. And therefore, to me, emphasis on materials management has been somewhat underplayed in our business schools. But if you look at what gives a competitive advantage to the managers, if many of the manufacturing systems, 60 to 80% of the cost of doing business is the cost of materials. So imagine if you're able to look for cost reduction in order to give value for money. It is here when, if for example, in a Maruti car, 80% of the cost of the car is the materials cost. And maybe 3.5% or 4% is the cost of labor cost or human resources. So we have somewhere underplayed the role of materials management although Maruti hasn't done it. In fact, one of the reasons why they become captured 53% market, that they have given an utmost attention to materials management right from day one. It's quite logical that if you really want to train your managers to be value-adding proposition to your organization, they must have the knowledge and skill sets to manage resources in a manner which indeed is relevant for that. And if 70 to 80% of the cost of the materials, and human resource cost is only 5 to 10%, even in public sector may not be more than 10%. And therefore, don't use human resource for cost cutting. They may be used for enhancing productivity, improving customer orientation, and so on and so forth. Their contribution should be more in positive sense in enthusing them, but not to cut down the labor cost, because it's anyway a very small component. And whatever labor cost that you have, by properly managing your materials, you can knock out the cost of people by simply saving on managing materials more effectively. Because if something costs you 80% of doing business, and you are able to cut down by 10% by better materials management methods and techniques, that 10% of 80% is about 8%, with the total cost of the workforce even in fairly overstaffed institutions. And therefore, this part I emphasize because somewhat missing in our knowledge. We have underplayed this. IT-enabled management, today almost everything is becoming IT-enabled. IT-enabled supply chain, e-commerce, and therefore there has to be a course on this. And service systems and their management. Now, Indian economy, if you know, 65% of the GDP in Indian economy comes from service sector. Manufacturing sector, unfortunately, only caters to about 17. It was intended in the national manufacturing policy given in 2010 that by 2025, 25% of GDP must come through manufacturing. But somewhere we had underplayed the role of manufacturing, so much so that even courses in BTech and MTech in manufacturing engineering, production engineering, are almost not at all being given, or they're not popular if at all. Therefore, service sector being contributing to 65% of our GDP, at least we should give on our MBA program or our BBA program a dose of what are the unique features of managing a service system. Because service systems need to be managed in a very different way compared to the manufacturing system. Because service systems have the uniqueness where the service provider and the service recipient, the customer, come in direct contact. Teaching profession is one such thing. It's, of course, because of the online, and most of you, in fact, even have muted your video has been now turned off. While you might see me, but I'm not able to see you, but anyway, you can hear me. A service system where customer and the service provider come in direct contact. And therefore, unless people are trained with this attitude to serve, customer orientation is absolutely critical in managing service systems with a positive attitude. And therefore, these 20 courses indeed will give you, just when you interview a person for an MBA graduate or getting him a job, rate him on these 20 attributes from low to high. This will give you his knowledge of management, domain knowledge for which you are hiring. And as I mentioned, if you are hiring a person in mechanical engineering, these 20 attributes will be different for them. If you're hiring a person in civil engineering, these 20% attributes of domain knowledge would be different. And therefore, this way, by having these modules, you're able to develop a well-grounded electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, or a management graduate, and not highly super specialized person. There's a tendency now to highly super specialize into finance, this and that. Perhaps a wider perspective, because as I mentioned, problems have to be seen holistically. No problem would only come as a finance problem or a engineering problem. Problems have multidimensionality, and they need to be seen in totality. And therefore, these skills have to be such that we develop them as a well-grounded management graduate, or a well-grounded mechanical engineer, or a well-grounded electrical engineer. And if you do that, that's the domain knowledge that you have. Now, similar thing, as I mentioned, and therefore, again, to measure it, you just have a tick amongst knowledge domain, and just measure number of frequency in each column multiplied by the weightage given to it, and it takes care. Then now come to the third attribute is skill parameter. The skill parameter, your IT skills, listening skills, oral communication, written communication, conceptual skills, vision, body language. Now, in fact, this I hardly can see an organization which gives or an educational institution which gives you training in body language. In fact, this has been shown in communication that the written communication only constitutes about 8% of total communication. Body language, that means your gestures, your movement, your facial expression, your body language, your eyebrow, your eye movement, your finger movement, the kind of body language that you display is far more powerful communication than now this is where perhaps many times we have not given adequate attention, although in a jargonistic term, this is known as neuro-linguistic programming, where you're trained and therefore to some extent, I think our engineering graduates, our management graduates must be given adequate training in nurturing themselves into having appropriate facial expression while expressing themselves. And many times you've seen that this is missing because in what you say and what you are seen in saying so would have an impact on the communication. And I have come across many people who say sorry while laughing. They're laughing and saying sorry. There's a contradiction between what they are saying and what they're seen to be saying, and it does not become an effective communication. And therefore, when you read all the three attributes of a good communication, which is a very, very powerful skill set, as I said in the beginning, oral communication, written communication, and body language together needs to be given. And body language is a very pronounced form of communication, because many times you can communicate without saying anything by appropriate body language. Of, if suppose you show compassion, empathy, on an occasion where you need to show empathy and compassion, and your body language does not show that empathy and compassion, karuna, then any amount of oral communication would not do. It will not go down the throat. And they put adequate skill set, emotional intelligence, that are EQ gives you inner peace. Problem solving skills, as I said, managers and engineers are primarily problem solvers. And adequate statement, how do you formulate a problem? How do you formulate objectives? How do you prioritize your objectives? How do you generate alternatives in solving problems? How do you optimize them? They have a capacity to problem solving. While quantitative decision science can do that, but decision science does not make decision making as a science. It's a combination of art and science, and therefore it's a skill and knowledge put together, and the right kind of knack of solving problems, interpersonal skills, relationship management, out-of-box thinking, getting ideas out-of-box thinking, organization skills, because if you plan but don't implement, that's where we again fail. We might plan, but our implementing that idea fails miserably, or many times our project is behind schedule because somewhere implementation focus is missing. Social skills, capacity to accept others as they are, the capacity to implement policies across a varied group of social elements of the society, presentation skills, eye for details is again a missing dimension. We might talk big, but we miss out the minor nuts and bolts details while implementing it. And suddenly you find that you aimed at launching an important project on a particular day, and some very small, trivial dimension of supply was missing. So that you're running out, okay, our eye for detail is very poor. And as a result, you really want to be effective. A good manager or a good engineer must have a very strong eye for detail, so they're able to find the missing link. Otherwise, you'll not be able to implement on time. Analytical skills, deriving value from data. That's where your data analytics do. Because any manager who is able to derive value from data is available, but very few people can make sense out of it. And therefore, they'll be high in demand, and it requires a tremendous skill to derive value from data. Conflict resolution. Conflict is bound to happen if there are people in the society, people in the organization. And one must understand that you should be willing to work with people you may not necessarily like. Sometimes we have that kind of we only hover around our people whom we like. The capacity, because everyone in the organization does not maybe of your liking. Therefore, this capacity to work with people whom you may not necessarily like is an important attribute of conflict resolution. And the conflict resolution has to be in removing the cause of the conflict rather than win-lose. Because imagine the win-lose strategy that you make the other person lose can never be a sustained base of conflict resolution. Remove the cause of the conflict rather than making a person lose. Because a person who is made to lose will find enormous opportunities for setting score later on. And therefore, this cycle of win-lose, win-lose, win-lose would never lead to any sustainable conflict resolution. And therefore, learning effective methods of conflict resolution by removing the cause of the conflict, so that the effect of the, if you remove the cause, there will be no effect. And therefore, learning, and therefore, these robust common sense that I mentioned, comprehension of situational issues, because no two situations are identical. Therefore, understanding the situation and making, and this was there's a management theory called situational theory or contingency theory of management, that you must take the right course of action, recognizing the situation at hand. The stereotype approach in solving problems in every issue will not do. No two problems are the same, no two situations are same, and therefore that capacity to comprehend the situational differences are important. And then once again, and then once you do that, you measure. Now you have the attitude measured between 0 to 1 or in 100%, knowledge measured, and now you can measure employability. Now this indeed I tried, as I mentioned. Now in fact this of course you can now. I think I'm almost reaching my time. What indeed you need to. I'll share with you the experiment that I did, and later on I'll flash to these PPTs. What I did, and maybe some of you, organize. If you're really concerned that employment is not an objective, employability should be an objective. And if you're focusing on employability, people would know. You don't have to shout from rooftops that we have 100% placement. If indeed you have, people would get to know it. Focus on employability and not on employment. Because I don't imagine an educational institution in the business of giving employment, but you're in the business of making people employable. And 100% there. I mean, even 1% person there you have recruited, you have selected is unemployable. It's unfortunate. And therefore, focus on 100%, but 100% employability and not employment. That's where the right focus. Now, what I used to do in my MBA program that in the current university, in order to know, and it was so much so that all these NAC and NIRF ranking that we are able to get, to me, I'd proposed an idea that perhaps an educational institution must be gauged on the ranking about how much value addition they have done in employability of that person. What was in employability when he came to the MBA program? Let's say I'm talking MBA or in a BTech program. And what is in employability when he's leaving an MBA program? The difference in employability is the value added done by your organization. And therefore, I have been even toying with the idea that don't start ranking institutions based on the data that people fill in from here and there and by using consultants and filling the data. Let the society, the employer, the people, the students perceiving what is the value gained in terms of enhanced employability by studying in that college. So what experiment I tried for 3 years in my course that I was teaching, I'll give this form to them and ask honestly, and there where perhaps I failed, ask honest opinion about the students who admitted that honestly rate yourself on these 3 attributes of employability on a scale 1 to 5 based on this instrument that I've developed. The keyword here is honesty. And that will tell you when you entered the institution and employability was, let's say, 0.20. When you left the institution, again, fill up the same form. Again, honestly, assess yourself where you are now. And suppose your employability became from 0.20 to 0.40. The value gained by virtue of your gain in employability is your contribution of nurturing that student by your institution. And what I had proposed, that if the conventional NIRF or NANC ranking would always give top 10 ranks to any IIT and IIM only, perhaps the exercise of doing this year after year is for a great degree get affected. And then what I would suggested, that gauge the rank of these institutions by the enhancement of the employability. And therefore, even relatively less known institutions who get relatively poor quality input. And suppose an institution gets a poor quality input, but by sincerity, hard work, commitment to nurturing that person's employability, if you enhance his employability as much as to an elite school, which is doable. Only thing is that college has to make enormous efforts in doing so. To me, that college needs to be number one, because they have contributed to the society, to the nation building process, because after all, education is a nation building process. And by recruiting or admitting a relatively lower quality student to make him shine as good as anywhere else in the top schools, your contribution to the country is much more as an institution, rather than those institutions who took the cream and with a very marginal addition, maybe sometimes even degradation in their employability. And therefore, many times they get hired by the organization because they're perceived to be top 2% cream. So the screening process in getting them admitted is perhaps the major driving force of their employability. And to me, therefore, I'd tried that idea that, and if that had been done, perhaps organizations, institutions, colleges would be truly focusing on enhancing employability of their graduates, because ultimately, even if you do not get a great ranking, but your students feel that they have gained enormously in enhancing the employability, employers would come. Parents would know it's a college where what's going, because there you are really, you shine after being admitted, even if you're. So it's high time that the institutions focus on right priority in enhanced employability of all those you have admitted. Only thing is, if you are hiring a relatively low quality input, the institution has to make more determined effort in making them shine compared to those who are already in that very high bracket of admissions. To me, therefore, it's very important. So what I used to do, I used to measure their employability gain at the end of the 2 years. Now, in this, the experience was that those people who are honest in giving the self-assessment, because self-assessment has a great feature. If you do an honest self-assessment, there is no better way of doing assessment. An honest self-assessment is the best form of assessment. No external agencies which gives you ranking in NIRPNAC or whatever that you get it. It's a pity that we rely on others to give our ranking. If you do an honest self-assessment of yourself, the keyword is honest, you'll get to know where you stand. And finally, what matters is that. So my experience was, all those students who honestly assess them, because recognizing a weakness is first part in initial step in improvement. And those people who ticked in the very good and excellent column in all of their area, indeed, to my mind, were really not employable, because they don't have even an honest self-assessment of themselves. And that's what finally matters. So if you do, so therefore, if every company, an organization does this value enhancement at the end of the program, give a test, and your real introspection should come. Now, with that, I'll just very quickly run through, and the PPTs are far more than what I could cover. Now, for example, I would say that the weightage you give for finance, HR, finance, marketing, and is different. Yeah, we identified in a subsequent study. This is a subsequent study that I'm sharing with you now. There are core components you should teach, and specific components in attitude. So these are core components in attitude. So ethics, concern for others, modesty, empathy, sense of justice or fairness, commitment to excellence, initiative, desire to learn, open-mindedness, adaptability, and cleanliness are core requirements of attitude building. The specifics are dependability, integrity, farsightedness, positive thinking, discipline, perseverance, enthusiasm, team spirit, self-confidence. Now, what we found, the weightage, now you can see. Now, that's where the reference can see. Suppose these specifics, depending upon marketing, HR, finance, analyst, and operations, the weightage might, for example, in case where marketing, maybe the highest weightage, of course, positive thinking will find across almost the same. Some are positive thinking, but then maybe the team spirit is much more in marketing compared to R&D or analyst. Suppose you're doing only analyst, you are a job as analyst, you're doing computer, maybe you don't come into contact. So the weightages to these attributes may vary upon the kind of profession that you choose. And that's why giving a general title that, oh, so many graduates are not employable, in which area are they employable? Because somebody may not be employable as an analyst, is poor in quantitative, we may be good in social attributes, is hireable in marketing. And therefore, giving a sweeping statement that they're not employable, to my mind, is needs to be relooked at, because the skill sets are specific to the. Similarly, in
Can you unmute yourself?
yeah, okay.
Okay, right.
Somebody muted me. I don't know. Maybe you are not comfortable with what I'm saying, and I can stop it now. Because why should I be muted if I'm speaking? Somebody else has muted me. Never mind. I'm now on. Okay. Now, before ये कैसे हो गया? मेरे उस पीपीटी पे भी आपकी फोटो आ रहे हैं. ये कैसे हो गया?
So you need to reshare it again.
Okay, I need to reshare again. I'll do that. Anyway, I think I'll need to conclude quickly because there could be some questions. And I'll be happy to ask questions. What do I do? How do I, how do I reshare? I need to leave or what?
No. Go to share screen, sir.
No, I'm not able to see the share screen. Your photographs are, in fact, coming in the way. What do I do now? Anticipated. Okay. Let me now sit. Okay. I sit now. I'll share screen now. I can sit now.
Right.
Okay, share screen.
Right.
You're able to see now. All right. Now let me now quickly run through, because it's a. Now I've done subsequently. For example, there's an alternate. Now this model was a multiplicative model. To my mind, it was good. A non-linear multiplicative model. But somewhere people might feel comfortable with the additive model. You multiplied by. So if suppose you believe, although I personally believe that attitude should be a critical success factor. Brilliant people but negative are not employable. But then if somebody feels more comfortable, we should be open about the modeling. We validated it. And this is another linear additive model. 42% weightage to attitude, 26% weightage to knowledge, and 32% weightage to skill. This shows our teaching learning processes who are overplaying knowledge and underplaying skill to some extent need to be listed, and project-based learning, experiential learning, internship-based learning, practice school concept, practical-oriented learning, and therefore, if a linear model, there's an alternative model. Again, dominant factor is still attitude, and therefore, this way we can hire, and this has been, of course, this is a more research dimension. Now, based on this model, how do you now, and therefore that sweeping statement that 25% of people are not employable? I mean, the degree of employability would vary. I mean, you can't say, I mean, it says 0-1. You can, therefore, what we have developed in this model, that there is a degree of employability in a given chosen field. And therefore, this scale is, if the total score of employability is less than 50 in that particular field for which you're choosing, then maybe only then you are not employable. But it's 50 to 59, you are marginal, satisfactory, good, very good, excellent, and outstanding. And therefore, it's a graded ranking of employability rather than either or, and therefore that's something which we need to address. Now, this of course is, and I'm skipping it because we use this for QFD for evolving an ideal curriculum for this. Now, what I need to now do that, suppose you do for, let's see, now, maybe I'll come. Now, this is where how do I convert it to engineering? Suppose now these are the list of some of the, as I said, the major differentiator will be the knowledge domain. The attitudinal factors and some of the major skills that you have would be relatively independent of the domain area. There is marginal variation. And suppose you have computer science and engineering, mechanical engineering, and law, let's say. The domain knowledge topics that you need to cover in, let's say, computer science and engineering, understanding of data structures, design and evaluation of algorithms, logic building and programming paradigms, computer architecture and organization, database management systems, operating systems, networks, network and information security, software development process, software project management, mobility, ubiquitous computing, data mining and knowledge management, software matrix, understanding of internet and its functioning, application development using A, C++, PHP, Java, .NET, etc., understanding of business and financial terms, business intelligence, human resource management and organizational behavior, modeling and simulation, enterprise resource planning. Now, these are adequate modules which will give a fairly good understanding of a person in computer science and engineering. But as I said, one of the constant attribute is learning to learn. As the computer science newer algorithms emerge, the person tries to make learn more and more. Similarly, in mechanical engineering, understanding of basics of mechanical engineering, understanding various machining and manufacturing processes, development and analysis of graphics, understanding the laws of thermodynamics, machine component designing, applications of principles of thermal engineering, understanding of design and analysis of fluid mechanics machines, kinematics and dynamics analysis of machines, engineering materials, instrumentation and control engineering, internal combustion engines, programming on NCNCs, understanding of design and analysis of automotive engines, computational fluid dynamics, understanding of concepts of time study, method study, and industrial engineering, applications of design software, power plant engineering, quality assurance and reliability engineering, and flexible manufacturing systems, STEM and robotics, and so on. Now, therefore, depending upon the domain knowledge, you can give that, and we can therefore maybe I'll stop sharing now. Now, this is what I wanted to say about the basic concept and philosophy of employability, its constituent components, how to measure it, and some of the myths that people have spread against employability, that the employability being so low as 10%, 20%, 30%. To my mind, that has created more scare amongst, and the crisis of admissions or imbalance in the admissions people are having is primarily driven by that scare. Because to me, I can't imagine a developed nation without mechanical engineering, civil engineering, electrical engineering, communication. And if we're only producing computer science and engineering, and maybe more computer science rather than engineering, and not even giving adequate, I don't think we can travel long enough to become a developed nation. To my mind, therefore, it's high time that we revisit this concept of giving 100% placement, showing in the big advertisements, but focus on 100% employability. And I can assure you, whether you get ranking or no ranking, the employers would rank you, the parents would rank you, because after all that you are doing in the name of ranking is to attract parents and employers to come. Focus on right objectives of enhance employability of 100% people. There I'm all for 100%, because once a person has been selected by you, even if he was weak, your obligation to nurture him by giving more time and attention to him. This is a societal obligation. And if you focus on developing 100%, and for that you require great teachers. Because after all, by eliminating teaching and only teaching them through PPTs and that to online mode, but many times the great teachers, their presence in the class itself is inspiring. The communication, their fairness, the way they evaluate their students, automatically the values are caught, not taught. And therefore, as a result, this I thought perhaps might be of some use to you. And with this, from my side, over to you for any questions that you may be interested in asking me to. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you, sir, for giving your valuable insight on enhancing employability. Now the session is open for taking queries. Participants are requested to write the queries in the chat box. So here we have a few of the queries. So first question is that in one of the slide, you have mentioned that it is common for an individual for switching a job 5 to 7 times in his or her career. Is it a good thing to do? What are your views on it? Please enlighten us.
No, actually, as I mentioned that, you see, that was not my my study. That's something which I borrowed from the initial few PPTs. But job changes are very common. Many times a person changes job not because of his lack of loyalty in him or her. Many times the organization does not treat him well. And therefore, if he has to rise in the organizational hierarchy, perhaps only by changing the job, and you would notice that many times people have changed the jobs, have come up faster in organization. So partly it is the organizational HR policies too. If talented people are given their due in relevant time period, and they're compensated appropriately, they're appreciated appropriately, there may not be a need to change the job. That's one dimension. The other dimension is what? There could be lack of loyalty amongst people. And therefore, if people are changing job very fast, which I'm seeing is happening, but partly it's because of the organization. If a person is not paid on time, this person is not paid well, the person is not assessed properly, and if some other organization is willing to pay him more, if some other organization is willing to respect him more, if he changes the job, then don't blame him. But if a person is, the organization is treating a person very well, and he's being given compensation, everything's happening, and yet he changes over a couple of thousands of rupees here and there, to my mind, that's lack of loyalty, and that's not a good employee. So therefore, perhaps both dimensions are relevant. Sometimes people are compelled to leave because there is no growth prospects in a better career growth. Sometimes people leave in for trivial incentives, the lack of loyalty. But in general, for example, it might interest you to know, because you only showed me as a founder director of IT Roorkee, I have been teaching in IIT Delhi for the last 55 years. I started as a lecturer on 9th of August 1968. And as an honorary professor, yesterday I had my lecture class from 5 to 6 in IIT Delhi. So for the last 55 years, I've been teaching in IIT Delhi. I didn't feel the need to change my job because the organization is giving me a great satisfaction. Minor inconvenience, minor discomfort here and there. We don't leave a job for a minor hiccups here and there. In every organization, there are minor imperfections here and there. And therefore, so long as the organization is treating you well, paying you well, and is giving a right kind of compensation and the appraisal, and then leaving in the midstream of the course, if somebody is pinching you for 1,000 or 2,000 rupees more, this lack of loyalty. I have, for one, have never shifted. I went to Roorkee on a lien from IIT Delhi. But for all these 55 years, and still continue to teach there, they're nice to me. They keep on extending my honorary professorship every year. I'll continue. For me, there's no, although retirement was done on time, I'm living on my pension, but the passion that I have, and IIT recognizes that passion. My current university recognizes that passion. I still teach, although I'm pro-chancellor, but I teach a course every semester. I guide research. My 50th PhD would be defending his PhD thesis on 14th of November in this university. So both factors are important. Organization must treat people well, that they're not compelled to leave. But if being treated well, and somebody induces you to give a couple of thousand here and there, don't show lack of loyalty to the organization which have nurtured you so well. Both are important. I hope it gets the answer.
Okay, sir. Sir, another query. How we can help ourselves and others to change the attitude if necessarily required at some instances?
Now, this question is badly drafted. Attitude change if necessarily required. Actually, attitudinal change is necessarily required. There is no question of if in it. And required change for the better. So if there is a negative attitude, it must be changed to the better. Therefore, there is no if in it. But then, as I mentioned earlier, attitudinal changes are very, very slow. And most of it are made in the early stage of our life, in primary education, our parenting. Parents play an important role in building attitude. Primary education in an impressionable age makes an important. So, in fact, when I introduced this course on attitudinal building and human resource, and it's basically more an exercise in damage control, because by the time a person comes for studying in higher education, most of the attitudes are already made through a series of experiences in classroom, society, parenting, schooling. We need to do, therefore, continuous improvement, enrichment of attitude is a lifelong process. And therefore, developing attitude all the time, because improvement is in attitude is always possible. Improvement is such a term that is the largest room under the sun is the room for improvement. Even if you're fairly positive in your attitude, still there's a room for improvement. Therefore, continuous desire to improve along all those 20 attributes of attitude. You may be weak somewhere. In whichever column you are attitudinal, you are ticked as weak, becomes an agenda for improvement of your attitude. So the improvement in attitude is a continuous lifelong learning process, and one must must continue to, because in fact, I came across an employer who was advising that we hire 85% for attitudes, and we train you for the skills later on, because on the job training. So many times, attitude as an important component, but attitude cannot be taught in a cookbook style. The people who are teaching, the managers of the management of the organization, the people or leadership, do they show those attitudes that are you hope to nurture in your students? Therefore, it's a very slow process, but to my mind, a major improvement in fact, I call it this way. As Indians, we have brilliant minds. On knowledge and minds, there's no substitute. Even if the education is missing, even in relatively less educated, but brilliant people, they can think out of box. The jugaad as a concept. What we require is matching mindsets. A brilliant mind with a matching mindset is what makes a person employable. But if you have a brilliant mind but do not have a matching mindset, that means a negative attitude, highly self-centered, very unethical. Therefore, the moment minds and mindsets match, this India is bound to become a Vishwaguru. That's the only path of making India a great nation. Match your mindsets, and attitude is an instrument through which you improve your mindsets, and a continuous learning and an honest desire to continuously learning. And for that, a simple attitude will be take every weakness that somebody points out as an agenda for improvement. If somebody points out a weakness, accept that weakness, if it's honest weakness. Every weakness pointed out is an agenda for improvement, and therefore an honest self-assessment of yourself, your department, your college, your or whatever role, your organization. There is no substitute of an honest self-assessment. Okay?
Okay, sir.
All right.
So
Any other
next question is, in the context of India, where we are transitioning from the developing to a developed country, why not discussing as startup or own business establishment rather than employment?
No, actually, the employability, as I mentioned, is a quality attribute. What kind of quality you have as a person? If you're a good quality person, even if you set up your own business, you'll do well. So therefore, when you talk of employability, doesn't mean that's why I did not talk about placement. In fact, I do not even consider placement percentages at all. I never focus on that. I don't worry about if you develop people for employability, and even if they set up their own business, they will do extremely well in this business, because the skill set that we require are all important. Your concern for customer, your concern for others, your positive attitudes, your ethics, your capacity to take right decisions, your capacity to take risk, your financial management, your management of resources. All those are important skill sets required for even your own business, because even your own business needs to be managed. Therefore, all these skill sets would be still relevant, and therefore it's perhaps a wrong notion that if you are becoming your own startup, you don't require employability skills. These employability skills are skills of a good person, a good human being, and knowledgeable in a subject. Even your own startup, you must have a domain knowledge of the startup in which you are starting. Perhaps you'll do much better if you start a business in which your own domain knowledge is good, and then attitude and skills. Therefore, these are equally relevant if you have your own startup. Regarding India graduated into a developed nation from a developing nation, well, I'll accept if you say so. I don't need to make a comment on it. I'll accept what you say so. But to me, we need to enhance our educational systems. We need to, improve the quality of people that we have in order to exploit the demographic dividend. And this is possible if we make our students globally employable, because they are the youngest, population of the country. They are to be treated as an asset rather not a liability. And that's it. And if
Okay,
you do
sir.
so, you'll become Wish Guru. You'll become a developed nation one day. Whether
Yes.
you are already a developed nation, I don't stop you if you believe it, because everybody has right to believe. But if you follow these things, one day will definitely become a developed nation.
Sure, definitely. So next question is, generally the undergraduate students are in dilemma that they should go for the highest education or jobs or wherever after BTech programs. What is your suggestion?
No, you say it again. Your voice
So
was breaking.
generally the undergraduate students are in a dilemma that where they should go after their BTech, they should go for higher education or go for any job program. What is your suggestion on this?
Yeah. It depends upon the situation. You see, everyone has you see, that's why there are no stereotype answers to such questions. Everybody has to look at his own individual situation. Suppose the person has the resources and inclination to go for a higher studies, is always going to help him. Therefore, do not take higher studies as an alternative of employment. Higher studies must be seen as an investment in the long run. And unfortunately, we have not taken that in the right spirit. And therefore, if you know that there are no pressing needs of the family to get a job, and you can afford to further hone your knowledge skills by going for higher studies, because your family situation enables you to take up higher studies without waiting for, although sometimes people may like to first get few years experience before going to higher studies, and therefore the higher studies become more effective then. That's up to you. Once again, if you're in a pressing need to get an employment right now, then get the job right now. Later on, after taking a few years of experience and your family position permits you, then go for higher studies. Or you may go for higher studies right in the beginning if you permit. But then higher studies must not be seen in terms of what do I get after doing MTech. Even if you get the same package after MTech as you do in the BTech, this may be worthwhile in the long run. So look at higher studies as a dividend to be paid in the long run rather than immediate short run. Number two, everybody need not, because after all, look into your own. Maybe that if you do not need to go for higher studies, your skill sets do not require you to go for higher studies, then don't go for it. What's important is what is the strength that you have. And I'll give my own example. See, in fact, when I'm an IT and all through my was the top of there and PhD from IT Delhi, and I've been in IT system for 60 years. Traveled right from an undergraduate BTech through JE to the Chairman Board of Governors of IT Dhanbad and Mandi. But when I graduated from IT Kharagpur in BTech, I had a job. Obviously, IT people had a job. Even after, but I went for doing MTech because my skill sets told me that perhaps I will do better if I join academics, teaching and research. Because for a teacher, the important skill sets that you require is an outstanding academic record, a very inspiring communication skill, and a role model value system to be an ideal teacher, to be admired as a teacher. And perhaps I may not be able to sell soaps and detergents as a marketing representative in companies, but best in me will come out if I join academic teaching and research, because my skill sets were perhaps more inclined to it. And this it was known to but therefore went for higher studies. Even there I had job from industry, which was paying me twice as much as my job in IT Delhi as a lecturer was paying. But despite all the kind of discouragement from my classmates who called me, you know how classmates can treat you. अरे से तो पागल है, इतना great record career पे master बनने जा रहा है. But I was very clear in my mind the best in me will come out if I join teaching and research. So my only requirement was to become a lecturer in IT Delhi, because I belong from, in fact, I'm from that your area, greater, and I belong to a village in greater Gautam Buddha Nagar. That IT Delhi only desire to become a lecturer in IT Delhi. That's all. and for last 55 years, I never look back. So what I want to say, don't worry about what people say. Look at your own intrinsic strengths and weaknesses. Nobody is cut out for all jobs, and nobody is useless not to do any job well. Therefore, as a result, identify your own internal strength. So take a job, and therefore punchline here would be, whether you become a startup, whether you join industry, do the job that you love. So the best in you will come out. And love the job that you do. That's why, despite my 55 years of teaching, in fact, yesterday I was busy teaching in IIT Delhi. Today, in fact, today there is an IIT Delhi. There is a convocation, which, obviously, as a former director, I'm invited. But since I've committed to give a lecture to you, people were saying you could always ask Galgotia to reschedule. But that's my value system. I have given you a commitment. I chose not to attend the IIT Delhi convocation and the lunch that I was invited to, because I love the job that I do. I love teaching. If you have that degree of passion, I can assure you there is no better job than teaching and research, provided you fit into that framework. Outstanding academic credentials, inspiring communication skill, and a role model value system. And if you join a good organization, which I did in IIT Delhi, I never look back. Similarly may happen. If you're cut out for doing marketing job, do it. If you're cut out for doing administrative civil services, you're cut out to be a manager. So therefore, each individual need to find out the strength in him or her and take your best foot forward instead of governed by everybody in computer science. I'm sure people who are, jo bheda chal ho rahi hai, if some of them had taken mechanical engineering, civil engineering, they might have done much better in life than what they might do as a computer science. So don't be swayed by that bheda chal. Bheda chal naam se bhedon ke liye to theek hai wo. Insanon ke liye bheda chal theek nahi hai. Carve out your own inner strength. Find out where the best in you will come out. Do that job, be it industry, be it higher studies, be it teaching, be it research, or being startup, or joining politics, or joining civil services. Find out what best in will give you. Okay. I hope I've answered that question.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir, for sparing your valuable time and joining with us today. With this, we come to the end of this valuable session. All the participants are requested to fill the feedback form shared in the chat box before leaving. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, one. All right. Thank you once again for giving me a patient hearing, and I'll sign off now. Thank you. All the best. Thank you.
Okay, sir.